Up next, the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show with Snowden Bishop. After this message.
Evergreen is calling.
Are you getting enough CBD each day? Hemp Meds carries the most trusted CBD oil brands like Real Scientific Hemp Oil and Dixie Botanicals to make it easy to add cannabinoids like CBD to your diet. We hold all our hemp oil products to our rigorous triple lab tested standard to ensure that you and your family receive only the highest quality and most reliable CBD products. Hemp Meds is your trusted source for CBD. Visit hempmeds.com to get our premium CBD oil today. Use discount code CBD20 to get 20% off your first order. And now, broadcasting on StarWorldWideNetworks.com. It's time for the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show with Snowden Bishop. Listen in as Snowden interviews cannabis industry pioneers, marijuana experts, policymakers, medical practitioners, patients, and other amazing individuals with compelling stories to share. It all happens right now. Here's the Cannabis Reporter, Snowden Bishop.
Hi, and welcome back to the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show. I'm your host, Snowden Bishop. Today I want to cover a topic that has directly impacted my family. It's multiple sclerosis. Most people know at least one person with MS. It's considered to be one of the most common causes leading to disabilities in individuals. As of 2016, it was estimated that MS afflicts more than 1 million people worldwide, and approximately 450,000 here in the U.S. alone. For some, the symptoms just come and go. They aren't outwardly apparent to those close to the patient. But for others, the symptoms are progressive, and they can be debilitating over time with loss of mobility, excruciating pain, and in some cases, blindness. What makes the disease most frustrating is that there is no known cure. I've seen firsthand that the drugs commonly prescribed to treat symptoms of MS can be as debilitating as the disease itself. In recent months, I've spoken with a number of MS patients who have transitioned away from conventional treatment and are finding better results with medical cannabis. In the last couple of years, the National MS Society stated that the organization now supports the rights of MS patients to work with their healthcare providers to access cannabis in states where it's legal and where MS has been deemed a qualifying condition for medical use. As our guest, Dr. George Anastassov, explains, this is very, very good news. I'm excited to introduce him, but first, Dr. Brian Donner has our Medical Marijuana Minute update to set the stage. What do you have for us today, Dr. Donner?
Thank you, Snowden. I was happy to hear that you'll be talking about cannabis as an alternative therapy for multiple sclerosis. There are a number of reasons why I think it makes sense when you understand the nature of this disease. MS is a degenerative disease that results in loss of myelin, the protective layer of protein that surrounds our nerves. When this happens, nerves are directly exposed to damaging toxins, microbes, and autoimmune responses. Unprotected nerves can then cause disruption of nerve signaling that lead to muscle spasticity, severe pain, and loss of mobility, among other symptoms. While scientists are uncertain of the exact causes of MS, we do know that inflammation, depression, poor appetite, and stress can trigger progression of this disease. A deficiency in amino acids, phospholipids, and trace minerals can also be complicating factors. Unfortunately, there are no known cures for MS at this time. Conventional treatment protocols call for medications to try and slow the progression of myelin loss and a variety of medications that deal with each underlying symptom individually. Most commonly, these include steroids for inflammation, opiates and anti-inflammatories for pain, benzodiazepines for anxiety and muscle spasticity, stimulants for fatigue, and a host of other drugs to counter the numerous side effects. These drugs oftentimes do little to improve the quality of life for people suffering with MS. They can also lead to other debilitating problems such as compromised organ function and addiction, among others. Fortunately, we're beginning to understand the vital role the endocannabinoid system plays in governing the autoimmune and neurological systems, key factors in controlling MS and its symptoms. Cannabinoids such as THC and CBD have shown to be therapeutic for controlling pain, spasticity, depression, sleep loss, and other outward symptoms of MS. More importantly, we're beginning to understand the neuroregenerative and anti-inflammatory properties of cannabis, which can help explain why so many MS patients show improvement when they transition from conventional treatment to medical marijuana therapy. It may be some time before we can fully understand all the scientific reasons cannabis is beneficial for people with MS. But for now, as a physician, I would have no problem advising a patient with MS to try medical marijuana as an alternative treatment where it is legal to do so. I'm Dr. Brian Donner for the Cannabis Reporter. I'll be back again next week with another Medical Marijuana Minute. Back to you, Snowden.
Thank you so much, Dr. Donner. Oh, let's get started. I am delighted to introduce our guest today, Dr. George Anastassov. He's a board-certified craniofacial surgeon who holds medical and dental doctorates and an executive MBA with numerous professional and managerial certifications. His clinical practice includes teaching at Mount Sinai School of Medicine and Beth Israel Medical Center in New York. He's also a visiting professor at Wilhelms University in Munster, Germany. Elected by Who is Who in Medicine, as well as Who's Who in Business professionals, numerous times, he's the receiver of multiple national and international professional and humanitarian awards. Having been actively involved in research and development in medicine and biotechnology since 1987, he has published multiple peer-reviewed articles as well as authored and co-authored textbooks and lectured over 115 invited guest lectures nationally and internationally. Today, he's the chief executive and chairman of the board of Axim Biotechnologies. Dr. Anastassov was one of the founders and CEOs of Can-Chew Biotechnologies in 2012. He's one of the developers of the first cannabinoid-based controlled-release transoral mucosal chewing gum for delivery, and will be conducting a clinical trial specific to MS, which brings us to our topic today. Wow, that is one long list of credentials, Doctor.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, well, I'm very, very interested in, as the topic, it is near and dear to my heart because, there's just so little that can be done for MS patients. But like I said, so many people are having success with cannabinoid-based treatments. But I'm really interested in hearing about this study that you have coming up on the oral chewing. It's a chewing gum, basically, that's formulated. Is this specific to MS, or how does that work?
Yes, thank you for your kind questions. This gum is specifically designed to treat the patients with multiple sclerosis with symptoms of pain and spasticity, which are the two most common symptoms of the disease. And we had a very nice introduction before me regarding this disease. There are 4 different types of MS. They have different symptoms, they have different progression, but they're all debilitating, some of them more debilitating than others. So it is well known that certain cannabinoids, and as of today there is more than 140 of them, actually 141, have differential effects on different systems. But I think that the key with multiple sclerosis is to understand that if you will, the beginning of this, all of these processes are based on inflammatory reaction and inflammation. That's what causes the breakdown of the myelin and what happens later on. So we do know that CBD in particular has excellent anti-inflammatory properties. THC has good anti-nociceptive properties, so in patients who are struggling from pain. So the combination of the two may have additive effects, and not may, it does. We know that because we are not the first company to utilize cannabinoids for treatment of multiple sclerosis. There's a predecessor there, GW Pharmaceuticals, which have a product which is approved, if I'm not mistaken, in 28 countries, including the European Medicines Agency. It's approved in Canada, it's approved in Mexico, and it's approved in Colombia, so all around us. But it's not approved by FDA yet, and there is a reason for that. But this medication contains THC and CBD, 2.4 and 2.5 milligrams. So we started our work some 15 years ago, and we started not with multiple sclerosis in particular, but our primary interest was pain. And when I say we, it's my partners from the Netherlands. One is a craniofacial surgeon as well. The other one is a chemist and a biochemist. And so we're looking for novel if you will, classes of analgesics without opioids, without non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. And that's how we stumbled upon cannabis, if you will. So it was a long time before all of this exuberance in the United States about cannabinoids and medical cannabis and so on. We were simply looking for something which is less addictive, which doesn't have the side effects prone to the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. But then we're looking for delivery system because as doctors, of course, we are not supporters of smoking of any kind, any type of combustive inhalation, which is, of course, inflammatory by itself for the upper respiratory tract and carries a whole array of different problems with it. So we were looking into injections, into tablets, suppositories, oils, and so on. And so that's how we looked into there's an interesting model, of course, for nicotine replacement therapy, Nicorette, and many other commercial names. And so we're looking to a similar model, but the problem with cannabinoids are multiple. So to develop a system which is trans-oral mucosal, which doesn't contain any solvents such as alcohol or others, and allows for the transmucosal penetration of the cannabinoids, which are, of course, as we know, lipid-soluble. They're not water-soluble. Also to be able to protect the THC in particular from oxidation and auto-catabolization, and also to predictably deliver this compound within 20 minutes, it is not that easy. So that's why it took so many years and so many different patents and technologies associated with technology. Because sometimes when people talk about chewing gum, and everybody thinks they just get gum and mix it with cannabinoids, and here is your cannabinoid chewing gum. Well, yes, you can do that, but either this cannabinoid will not release at all from the gum because it's bound to it because it's not water soluble, or if you somehow be able to convert it from hydrophobic to hydrophilic form, the patients will just swallow it, and then you will have the effects of the first pass metabolism, or the so-called liver metabolism, when you have conversion of THC to 11-hydroxy-THC, which is extremely toxic metabolite, because what makes people, let's say, paranoid and hungry and all the other negative side effects of smokable marijuana, it's not the THC by itself, it's the 11-hydroxy-THC. And in a smokable form, there is only 15 to 20% that goes through this particular metabolic pathway. But if somebody is swallowing these preparations, such as oils or candies or cookies or any other form, well, 90% goes to this metabolic pathway. So that's how we started. We were looking for a controlled release delivery system which can predictably deliver these compounds. But then we asked for scientific advice from the Dutch Ministry of Health as to how to move forward, in what direction. And we were introduced to the Department of Neurology at the Free University of Amsterdam to Professor Eric Schroeder, who's the chairman of this department. And at the time, he had a PhD candidate. Her name is Roxanne Weyenberg. And her thesis was mastication, the act of chewing, as neuroprotection. Now, we're talking about multiple sclerosis, which obviously is a neurodegenerative disease, among many others, such as Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and so on and so forth. And so her thesis was based on the hypothesis that the act of chewing by itself has neuroprotective properties. And we didn't know nothing about it, I can admit freely here. But she eventually defended her thesis with, excellence. She's a professor at the university and she works on our program. So de facto, the act of chewing by itself has neuroprotective properties. And what exactly does it do? Well, the act of chewing improves the circulation of the cortex. It increases the velocity of the middle cerebral artery, which means that it improves the circulation for the cortex. It also increases the release of reward hormones such as serotonin, dopamine, acetylcholine, and others. The act of chewing concentrates, improves the concentration, improves the short and long-term memory, improves the performance of students on academic tasks. And also it delays the degeneration of the cortical degeneration. So all of these facts combined with cannabinoids delivered in a predictable fashion led us to the belief that we will have a superior system out there on the market where 1 and 1 doesn't equal 2, but maybe 3 or 4, because we are hopeful that these effects are synergistic, that on one hand, we will deliver these wonderful molecules, which in this case is THC and CBD. It's 5 milligram and 5 milligram. And on the other, we will have the positive effects of the act of mastication. So that's the basis of our work.
Wow, that's a lot of information to digest. This is very interesting that you say that the act of chewing actually has all of these benefits as well. In making a gum like this, you said it took you about 15 years to develop this. Is the actual chewing gum material itself treated with, how does that work? How does that work?
Well, let me explain. It's a question of first extracting extremely high quality and consistent molecules, because when we speak about medical marijuana or medicinal marijuana, for anything to be medicinal, it has to comply with certain regulations. And in case of the FDA, it has to be less than 0.2% impurities or others, if you will. So it has to be absolutely consistent molecule. And that's one of the problems with a product which is not being approved by FDA, and the efforts are there since 2007, because this particular product contains 2% of others. Now, in our case, the technology consists from the moment, first of all, let me backtrack that we use materials which are produced by the only company in the world which is GMP certified facility to produce pharmaceutical grade cannabinoids. The name of the company is Bedrocan in the Netherlands. It's controlled by the Dutch Ministry of Health, and it produces for the last 30 years the very same strains, because they don't grow from seeds, they grow from clones. So they basically clone the same plants for these last 30 years. Then we extract cannabinoids with 99.99% purity. Again, we're utilizing our own extraction technology, which we believe produces the highest yields and the purest cannabinoid extraction. Then we convert the cannabinoids from hydrophobic form, in other words, from something which is not water soluble to something which is water soluble, which is also our IP. And then we microencapsulate these cannabinoids, which increases the bioavailability of the final API 3 to 4-fold. So there is a lot that goes into technology there. It's the handling of the cannabinoids. It's the gum itself, the fabrication of the gum itself, because we have to make sure, as I explained before, that within 20 minutes we have at least 80% release of the active ingredients. And so, this is the technology. It's using certain components in the gum which were not used before us. We have 2 patents on this. And then, of course, the handling of the cannabinoids by itself.
Right. And in the Netherlands, they're a lot farther ahead than we are here in the United States in terms of academic research on cannabis and that sort of thing. And it's been legal there for a number of years, hasn't it? Legal access to cannabis?
Well, I can't speak on politics of the Netherlands. I mean, we work with the chairman of the medical cannabis board there, Dr. Marco van der Velde. So the legalities are, I guess, similar to certain states in the United States, such as California or Oregon and so on. But again, research has been going on there. Research is ongoing right now with one of our compounds, but for a different indication, which is irritable bowel syndrome. But as far as the politics, I truly cannot comment. I'm a doctor and somewhat of a businessman, but not a politician. I can't really make a comment as to what is the difference or what are the similarities between the two. All I know is that for us, the barrier, and not only for us, but for any company which is dealing with cannabinoids, the barriers to entry are extremely high, because these are still Schedule 1 substances. Whether we agree with this definition or not, but we need government permits for every shipment from the growing facility to the extraction facility to overseas and then back to the Netherlands. So for every shipment of this, we need special permits for Schedule 1 substances. So the barriers to entry are quite high. So it's not that easy to do research. If everything is done by the rules, if everything is done with the support of the Ministry of Health and academic support, yes, it is doable, but not otherwise. So it's pretty strictly controlled, I must say.
Yeah, and when it comes to treating patients with MS, what has been your experience in seeing the difference between traditional protocols for MS and cannabis as a treatment? So
as described before me, the patients with multiple sclerosis are extremely unfortunate group, because there's nothing out there which consistently treats all the symptoms of the disease. Because currently the disease is treated symptomatically. The inflammatory phase is treated with anti-inflammatories. Of course, the pain is treated with opioids. Then you have baclofen and others. But all of these have side effects, and none of them really capture the whole spectrum of the disease. And again, the problem also with multiple sclerosis is that it's not very well known precisely what is the cause, what causes the multiple sclerosis. But one thing is for sure, it's neuroinflammation. So I think that in the case of multiple sclerosis, not only we have to be active once the disease is diagnosed and hopefully in an early stage, but also to be proactive, because there's certain cannabinoids such as cannabidiol. They don't have any psychotropic properties, but they have excellent anti-inflammatory properties. So if we can prove that these particular compounds, such as cannabidiol or cannabigerol in the future, that they do have neuroprotective properties, whether it's in a chewing gum form or any other acceptable delivery format, I think that what we should be looking is the prophylaxis of the disease and not treating it when it's already in advanced recurrent stage.
Right. So as a preventative measure, it seems like the neuroprotective qualities would be fantastic.
I agree. Yes. As long as we can prove that this is the case. The problem with that, and we are embarking upon this, is that these are longitudinal studies. So we have to prove within, let's say, 10 years that there is a difference between one group taking these compounds and another group which is taking placebo, which is not that easy to do, of course,
right.
Because how can you stratify the two groups of potential sufferers? But that's the only way to bring it to science.
Yeah, well, especially since, no two people with MS have exactly the same symptoms. I mean, they seem to come and go, the symptoms. So that must be very difficult to control in a setting like that.
It is very difficult. It's very difficult to stratify the patients. There are 4 different types of MS. Some are extremely rapid and progressive. Some are remitting. Some are combinations. So it's difficult to put everybody in the same group. And also, it's very difficult to find one compound which is effective against all the symptoms. So when we're talking about symptoms, in our case, we're looking for patients with pain and spasticity, and that's the key for our patients. So most of the forms of multiple sclerosis, of course, carry spasms and resultant muscle aches and pains. So if we can prove statistically, with statistical significance, that the patients who are taking our preparations versus placebo, and then comparing it also with other existing medications and showing higher efficacy, I think that we will prove our concept.
Yeah. So working with the FDA and getting a clinical trial together, are you hands-on in applying for the ability to conduct these studies?
Yes, we work with a CRO, which is called QPS. That is International Contract Research Organization, and also Xendo, XENDO. And so with this two organizations, we've been working together for the last 5 years to create the protocols for phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and of course in cooperation with EMA, which is the European Medicines Agency, and FDA. So yes, everything has to be done in accordance with the regulatory agencies.
And how far along are you with the study?
How far along are we? Well, we hope, and again, the clinical trials are very tricky. We hope to complete phase 3 of our MS clinical trial by the first quarter of 2018. That's regarding MS. We will complete our IBS study, which contains also cannabinoids in a chewing gum form, by June of this year. We have completed another trial on patients with dermatological conditions, which is eczema, psoriasis, and vitiligo. So this is already done. And we have a number of other studies which are in our pipeline.
Oh, wow. So not just MS here. You're talking a broad spectrum of conditions. Yes,
we are. Because there is never a certainty that everything will go according to our wishes. So certain things may get delayed, certain things may have to be rerouted or reformulated. So we're trying to be not one circus pony, but to have a few different projects going simultaneously.
It's quite exciting to see these studies come out because, we have lots and lots of anecdotal evidence that cannabis is effective in treating so many different things. But,
It's true, because, before we can label something as efficient, we have to have statistical significance. I mean, we're working on 9 different preparations currently, not all chewing gums, but many different types, combination drugs, but for 14 different indications. So at least we have to have a proof of concept study which is showing, yes, indeed, in this particular group of individuals, we have X percentage of improvement of symptoms before we can say with certain level of certainty that, yes, okay, it works. But then again, to pass FDA scrutiny, it has to be multi-center, randomized, placebo-controlled trial. There has to be a center in the United States, and the results have to be reproducible. But it's not that easy. It may work on one patient. Of course, there is the placebo effect and so on. And they may say, I feel so much better. I feel fantastic. I feel great. But somebody else will try it and say, well, you do nothing for me or made me feel worse. So, I mean, to label something as efficient, it's a long path.
Right. Yeah, it's really phenomenal. And is there going to be a version, do you think, of the gum that is just CBD based?
Yes, we do have. We have a CBD gum on the market for the last 3 years, which is 10 milligrams of CBD. But we're investigating now a 50 milligram CBD gum in patients with IBS, and there will be also a higher dose of CBD. It will be 100 milligrams CBD for totally different indication. But we have multiple dosages of CBD gum. Right.
Yeah, it's a kind of an exciting delivery platform you've got there. I imagine that it's going to be easier for people to kind of control their dosing too.
Of course. Well, and also look at the positive effects. If we look back to the nicotine replacement therapy model, I mean, there are many different ones. You have pills, antipsychotics, you have transdermal systems, you have chewing gum. And it seems that the people who are using the chewing gum to cut their cravings for cigarettes are doing the best. And our thinking is that perhaps it's not necessarily the nicotine inside the gum, it may be the chewing gum by itself, because many people quit smoking just by chewing Wrigley's or whatever. I'm not endorsing any brand, but I think that the act of chewing does have a beneficial effect because, again, the act of chewing releases these hormones, so-called reward hormones, serotonin, dopamine, and people feel much happier. I mean, if you look at the person who is eating, they're usually happy, unless they're eating, Mexican pepper, which will make them cry. But other than that, I think that the act of chewing by itself is, does have all of these positive effects. And Roxanne's PhD is 300 plus pages, substantiating why this is so with functional MRIs and so on. So I think that, yes, it will be a more desirable delivery form because it's not a pill, it's not an injection, it's not a transdermal system, which may be irritative, and it's pleasant, and it has a positive effect as well, because if you think about another component, speaking about MS, patients who are taking baclofen, the number one side effect is dry mouth. And by smoking something, let's say containing cannabinoids, cannabidiol or whatever that may be, it dries even more the oral mucosa. Or if you're using a spray containing alcohol and cannabinoids, well, imagine putting alcohol on a dry mucosa. It's very painful and unpleasant. And on the other side, chewing gum, it actually increases the salivary production. It increases the flow of saliva. So I think there are a lot of beneficial effects with our system. But time will tell if we are right or wrong.
Yeah. For MS particularly, the neuroprotective is something that I think people will really be looking forward to learning more about how that's going to work through a clinical trial. Because I don't think, has there been a clinical trial with cannabis that you know about so far?
For multiple sclerosis?
Yes.
Yes. Sativex, which I mentioned before, it's 2.5 and 2.4 milligrams of THC and CBD, and it's an oral spray based on alcohol, and it's approved in 28 countries, maybe even more today.
Yeah, but not in the U.S. yet.
No, not in the U.S. The only product approved in the United States with cannabis or, cannabinoids, it's synthetic. It's dronabinol, or the commercial name of Marinol. There are probably 3 or 4 or 5 generics there. So that's the only product approved in the United States. It's 100% synthetic THC, and it's approved for treatment of chemotherapy-associated lack of appetite, nausea, and vomiting.
Yeah, I've always found that pretty curious. I mean, you've got such an amazing plant that in its organic form is incredibly therapeutic, and yet they went out of their way to make a synthetic version of it. I mean,
Yeah, I agree. And maybe that was the political situation in 1985.
yeah,
And they did have to come up something to treat these patient populations and later on the patients with HIV/AIDS, because there was evidence that certain cannabinoids are efficient in improving the appetite and eliminating cachexia. So perhaps that's why it was approved in 1985. And it's also not Schedule 1, it's Schedule 3.
yeah.
So, but again, I can't comment on the regulatory agencies.
Yeah,
Whether they have their
well,
own laws.
again, that's political in a way.
Exactly.
So let me ask you this: how did you become interested in cannabis to start with?
My partners and myself, we were looking into novel classes of analgesics, painkillers, and we were quite disappointed with what was on the market then. It's the same thing on the market today. It's the opioids and non-steroidals and the combinations between the two. So now we have in this country an epidemic of drug-related deaths affecting every state in the nation. And of course, the non-steroidals, we know the cases with the COX inhibitors and so on, when we had the cerebrovascular accidents and heart attacks and gastric problem with ibuprofen, with all of their complications. So we're looking for something which is perhaps similar in its effects, but without the side effects. And that's how we came up to cannabis. So it was strictly looking for a novel class of analgesics. And novel, of course, there is nothing novel because this plant has been used for 2,000 years, at least for these particular purposes. But we were looking for the alternative delivery system. But that's how we came to cannabinoids. It was in search for a novel class of analgesics.
Yeah. And you were quite ahead of your time then as well. I mean, in terms of the United States anyway, because I think the first medical marijuana law was passed in 1999 here in the United States.
Well, I mean, again, these are all political issues, the laws and so on. But, I mean, cannabis has been known for thousands of years. And it's not only us. There are many other companies, small and big, which have done quite a bit in this respect, both in naturally extracted products and synthetic products. I mean, there are hundreds of molecules of synthetic cannabinoids known and patented. So, I mean, I think that the research has been going on quietly without much noise out there. But I think that now when the winds have changed direction and when it's proven through multiple studies, I mean, just to give you an example, in the tiny country of Israel, currently there are 128 research projects registered related to cannabis. So wow. I mean, things are moving, I think, and there's no going back. Of course, unexpected things may happen. You remember what happened with, I believe the name of the company was Botal from Portugal, and which was working on FAH inhibitors, which do play a significant role in the endocannabinoid system. And people died, and others were brain dead, and so on. So one has to be careful. I mean, immediately it was linked to cannabis, and it has nothing to do with cannabis because it's a regulator of the endocannabinoid system. But nonetheless, unexpected things may happen. Why? Because this plant is so incredibly complex. We have 141 cannabinoids. We have 400 plus terpenes, and God knows what else in it. And what is the interaction between each and every one of these elements amongst themselves, and what are the effects individually? I mean, it's an extremely complex plant, so it does need a lot of research, needs a lot of funding, but probably the rewards may be, well, I think incredibly worth the effort.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface yet.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. I mean, I can see the developments in cannabis. You know, once people do really get a handle on all of these different interactions, I mean, cannabis could theoretically replace so many of the synthetic drugs that are out there. I mean, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. Not only drugs. I mean, there are 50,000 different products that can be produced from the cannabis plant.
Yeah.
Just about anything. Pharmaceuticals is only a very small part, but you can produce anything. Biofuels, building materials, electric batteries, I mean, you name it. Bathtubs, insulation, whatnot. So, I mean, I think it's incredibly interesting plant. It's probably the oldest plant on the earth. It's 27 million years old, proven. So, I mean, I guess there is a reason for this plant to be around
Yeah.
and to survive all of these years of floods and fires and comets and whatnot.
Yeah, it grows in drought. I mean, it's pretty. It's a very hardy plant, and
It is.
yeah, and actually, you were saying that the medical uses go back 2000. I think the earliest record of cannabis being used as a medicine was found in a bag, a Chinese medicine bag, in an archaeological site that dates back 4,000 years. Like, so that would be the first evidence of medical use of cannabis. I just think it's fascinating, something that, and not to mention the fact that we have a huge system in our body that naturally is unlocked by cannabis, the endocannabinoid system. It's just phenomenal.
Of course. But a word of caution, though. Again, this plant is extremely complex. The product, what it produces, the cannabinoid composition, the cannabinoid strength, and so on, depends on so many different factors. It depends what type of earth was it seeded on, what type of light, what type of water, when was it picked up, in the morning or in the afternoon or in the evening. And apparently, there is no more complex plant than this one, because no other plant requires so many different conditions to be met. So the word of caution is that one should be very careful, especially in the so-called medical cannabis site, when they're buying one brand or one name and expecting the very same quality they will have tomorrow or the next day or next year or whatnot, because it's not truly regulated. If there is only one company in the world that has GMP qualification to produce those plants, that means that there is still a lot that has to be done for ensuring the public safety, if you will, when the patients or consumers know for sure that what they're getting is what they're getting, that the cannabinoid composition is the same, that the terpene composition is the same. And it's happening. I mean, I see out there already, their websites and so on showing analytics for different plants. It's just a question of consistency, and I'm sure it will come.
Yeah, and also, as they start to develop standards too, and a lot of states are getting involved now in regulating which sorts of pest deterrents and that sort of thing can be used. Fungicides, pesticides.
Well, ideally, none of this.
Yeah, ideally.
None of this should be used.
Right.
They should be grown indoors. The light should be consistent. The water and the nutrients should be exactly the same. I'm not endorsing Bedrocan in any way, but it took them 30 years. To be able to isolate every chemical component there in the plant. So these are very difficult processes, and I'm sure the technology develops, and maybe what was 30 years up today, maybe it will take 5 years from today on. But that's the right path to go, because we're dealing with people's health. Many people are immunosuppressed for taking cannabinoids because there is nothing out there, or the immunosuppressive drugs have tremendous side effects. So I think that we have to be very careful what we're giving to the public, and to make sure that it is what it is, what we are prescribing or suggesting.
Yeah. So is the study closed now for new participants?
The study will take place in 3 centers. One is in the Free University of Amsterdam, one is in Great Britain, in the University of Plymouth, and there will be a 3rd site in the United States, which I'm not so sure that they have agreed yet to which site it will be. It will be in Boston, but I cannot disclose exactly which one it will be.
Right.
So as we come closer to that, well, there's going to be a 4th site, actually. I'm sorry to say that, in Switzerland. So as we come closer to the American arm of the study, I think that it may be open. That it may be open for participants, and depends on the numbers of the participants that we will have. It will be 100 patients, but let me not jump too far ahead.
Right, and all local to wherever it is in Boston, then I would imagine.
I would presume so. Yes.
Yeah. So, and how long do you anticipate?
The good thing is,
oh, go ahead.
That it's a short study. That we will have results once everything is done in clinics, again, if we have all the results tabulated by the end of the first quarter of 2018, we anticipate to go through regulatory process and have the drug ready by the end of 2018. Not necessarily by FDA, but hopefully, probably first in certain countries in the Netherlands where the study will go, and once it's there, then it will be received by EMA. The FDA may take a little bit longer, I would anticipate, but if there are no fundamental flaws there, I think that that we should be good by 2019.
So, and this is if the FDA approves after the study, then will this be available as a pharmaceutical drug would be, or would it still be regulated as the Schedule 1 and only available in states where medical marijuana is legal?
No, it will be available as a pharmaceutical by prescription drug.
Wow.
Now, speaking about, I will give you an example, which is Marinol. Marinol is Schedule 3. It's a gelatin capsule, soft capsule. However, the contents of this Marinol is called dronabinol. This is Schedule 1 substance. So if somebody breaks the capsule and pulls out the dronabinol, now they're dealing with a Schedule 1 substance. However, in the dispensary form, which it is available, in the soft gel capsule is a Schedule 3. So we will be looking not to have Schedule 1, because Schedule 1, that means that it's not going to be available at all. A pharmacist or a doctor cannot prescribe it. So it has to be regulated and scheduled as at least Schedule 2 or Schedule 3. We're working on a drug which is replacement for Marinol, which is also synthetic THC, but instead of a capsule form, in a controlled-release chewing gum. So we would hope, and we are waiting for an advice from FDA, to have it regulated as Schedule 3 as well. And why is that? Because we think that the abuse potential for a gelatin capsule is much higher than a chewing gum. Why is that? Because it's so easy to puncture a capsule and extract what is inside than to try to extract back the cannabinoids from a chewing gum. It's virtually impossible and doesn't make any sense. So we hope that once we come to this point, FDA will reasonably weight all the options, because it's all about abuse potential. Recently, there was a drug approved to a company which is in the same space, and it was approved to Schedule 2. Schedule 2 does complicate things quite a bit, and it's the very same dronabinol, it's the same molecule, but for a different indication. And the logic of FDA was that because it's in an oil form, the abuse potential is quite high. And it's probably true, because the oil can be vaped and, well, maybe many different things with it, which is not the case with the chewing gum. I mean, it's again, as I said, it's virtually impossible. Only in laboratory environment, maybe it would be possible to extract the components, the THC and the CBD. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, it will be extremely expensive and doesn't make.
Right, but this particular trial is not the synthetic, though. This is the actual organic form of THC and CBD. Yes,
it's extracted from. It is THC and CBD, which are extracted from plants.
Right.
But they're concentrated and purified to 99.99% purity. So they fall within the FDA's cutoff point for purity.
Right.
Because if you look at dronabinol is also not produced from carbon and water. It's produced by a synthetic pathway from limonene. So again, it's not entirely synthetic. So there's a little bit of semantics here. You have synthetics, you have biosynthetics, and you have extraction forms. But as far as we are assured by our regulatory partners, it will be considered by FDA as compliant with synthetics, because it's almost 100% pure.
Right. And then, of course, the delivery method, which cannot be altered, is what would allow you to move that into a Schedule 2 or 3, correct?
But that's our hope.
Yes, okay. This is all very interesting to me, because, so few FDA-approved studies are underway right now, and, more and more hopefully will be as people get approval, but it's, they're few and far between, so it's a process that I don't really fully understand, so I actually very much appreciate hearing your take on it.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's a long pathway. I must say that to develop a new molecular entity, that means a new formulation for a drug, the average is 10 years and $2.5 billion with B dollars.
Wow.
The good thing is that cannabis is not a new molecular entity. It's been around for a very long time, as you said, 4,000 years perhaps. So these molecules are very well known. They're very well studied. And so we don't have to start with everything from scratch, which helps quite a bit. Because if it is a new molecular entity, the pathway is significantly longer and much, much more expensive, prohibitively expensive, especially for smaller companies like we are, maybe not for Pfizer or whatever, Johnson & Johnson, but for us it would be.
Right. So with cannabinoids, have you seen actually results of like myelin production, any regenerative qualities when it comes to MS so far?
We personally, no, we haven't done studies like that.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, how can you, well, I mean, unless it's an animal model which is trained to chew a gum.
Right, no.
It's very difficult to implement. I mean, there are, of course, models for demyelination. There are models for different types of neurodegenerative diseases in small animals and also in petri dishes. But again, this is a bench. These are bench studies which not necessarily translate into clinical efficiency. So no, I mean, we are going directly into patients, and we will compare with other studies done before us with similar compounds and to see what the clinical outcomes are. But to see direct remyelination of nerves, no, I don't think that anyone has done that or will do that. It's a question of clinical symptomology. It's a question of quality of life, and that's what we are investigating.
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited to hear the results of the study, for sure. What would you tell medical professionals who are right now considering learning more about cannabis as a therapeutic option? Because I mean, there is some resistance in the medical community, but then there are a lot of medical professionals who are really advocating for more education and that sort of thing. What would you tell healthcare practitioners?
I think that this is the key. You just mentioned it. The key is education. When I was in medical school quite a few years ago, I didn't learn nothing good about cannabis. I learned that it is an addictive drug and so on. And when I came to the U.S., very similar situation. So in today, medical schools across the United States, there are very few which do have courses on the beneficial properties of cannabis. But all that said, I see more and more courses available in the United States and internationally. There is the ICRS, and there are so many different organizations populated by serious researchers with tens of years of experience working with cannabis, whether it's in the United States or in Uruguay or in Israel or in the Netherlands or whatever that may be. So I would say that ignoring something is not the best way to learn something. Mm-hmm. I think that if doctors have interest, the data is readily available there, and there are sources which are reliable and sources which are not reliable. Recently came a huge publication by the American Academy of Sciences dedicated to cannabis and to the level of clinical evidence as of today of which diseases are beneficially affected by and which are not, where the evidence is lacking. So I think that if anybody who has interest in this field, and the field is incredibly broad because it's not one specialty, it's not only neurology, it's oncology, it's hematology, it's psychiatry, and well, anyway, name it, anesthesiology, pain management. So it's an incredibly broad field, and thankfully there is information available today which gives us set point, if you will, as to where we stand today and what is happening today and where things are going. Also, of course, there is the clinicaltrials.gov, which is controlled by the FDA, and where it's very easy to see which trials are being handled today and see the progress of these trials and the results. So I think that the people should open their eyes and always, look into something which is out of the box. And I think that in this case, that's cannabis. Now, does it mean that cannabis is panacea? Of course not. We have to look as to what is it efficient against. Is it effective in every patient or not in every patient? I mean, because there is truly much more unknown than known about the plant, even when you're comparing different cannabinoids, THC, CBD. Well, we know about the pediatric epilepsy, and there is so much information, if you will, in the media. And they're showing little children. Some of them says, "Oh, I've been on THC oil and I'm seizure-free for 350 days." And then there is another child that, "Oh, I've been on CBD oil for 355 days and I'm seizure-free." And one scratches their head and says, "Okay, well, what is it? Is it the THC? Is it the CBD? Is it something else? Is it the terpenes?" So the research is needed.
Yeah.
There is some anecdotal evidence there, no doubt about it. Is it Schedule 1? I will conserve my comment for that. But I think that the research should continue, and I think that we will learn much more, and hopefully mostly positive about the plant.
Yeah, well, it seems to be. I mean, it seems we're headed in that direction, and you're right. I've seen a lot more educational opportunities opening up right now for healthcare practitioners and for patients as well. And
absolutely, yes.
You know,
yes.
and patients, one of the biggest obstacles to patients learning for themselves is the stigma attached to it, and that's a whole other subject.
Of course, yes. Well, the stigma and also available delivery forms, because if you look into smokable forms, whether it's cigarettes or vapes or whatever other methods are there, I mean, these are not the best. If you look into vapes, they have cadmium batteries and whatnot. That's carcinogenic source. If you're looking into oils, these are very high caloric intake substances. So if it's a pediatric child, they may blow up in weight. So it's also a question of the delivery system. So whether it's sprays or chewing gum or suppository or whatever, but they have to be improved delivery formats for these particular molecules. So it's not only a question of purity and quality, but also delivery systems. I think that's where we are kind of falling behind a little bit as well.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest problems with edibles, from what...
Exactly.
And people complain about that all the time. There's just absolutely no way to make that dosing precise.
Exactly. And I mean, everybody's individual. Everybody's liver works a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's some people, they eat this brownie, let's say, and they feel the result in 1 hour. And other people that may happen in 3 hours. And they may be on the road driving or, signing their wedding decree or something. So yeah, I think that the edible form is easy because the patients, especially the ones who probably don't have access to more superior delivery systems, it's easy to do at home. But the dosing is very difficult and the effects are uncontrollable. Thanks God nobody dies from this, of course, but still there is need for improved delivery systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's all very exciting, what you're doing, and thank you so much for sharing all of this with us today. Any last thoughts you'd like for our audiences to know about the upcoming study or what you're doing?
Well, I would like to thank you very much for your time and for the excellent questions. I hope that I was able to answer them somewhat. And I think that we should keep the dialogue open and keep the public informed as to what's happening around here, not only regarding our products and our systems, but what else is happening in this world. And so I will be available anytime for your further questions.
Well, thank you so much for that. And I really look forward to seeing the study. And, if ever there's a time that you have some research that you'd like to share, please do reach out. And I would love to revisit this topic with you when you get a little bit closer to finalizing this as well. So, yes, let's stay in touch.
Sure. Most definitely, Snowden.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
pleasure being here.
Thank you so much. So a big thank you to our guest, Dr. George Anastassov, for sharing his insights and knowledge with us today. If you'd like to learn more about the study and the work that he's doing, please visit us online at thecannabisreporter.com and click broadcast to find today's episode. I'll post his bio and information there as well. And many thanks to our producer, Wendy West, and the team here at Star Worldwide Networks for making us shine. I'd also like to thank Dr. Brian Donner for our Medical Marijuana Minute Update. I'd also like to express our gratitude to our radio sponsor, HempMeds.com. We could not be doing this without you. And last but not least, thanks to all of you for listening. Tune in next week, same time, same place, for another episode of the Cannabis Reporter radio show. My name is Snowden Bishop, and I'll be back again next week. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, share what you've learned, and make it a great day.
Evergreen is calling, evergreen is always where I feel fine. The blue's blue falling, and sheets made forever across the great divide.
Pure CBD is a new and unique fresh-tasting spray product which delivers an exact measured amount of the highest grade 100% cannabis oil with each spray. Each tube holds a 30-day supply when used as directed. No smoke, no mess. For discreet use, Pure CBD can be used anywhere. Pure CBD from Zephyr Labs.